got your Mag and Mac guys. Jody McDonald, John McMullen here with you on Birds 365. And we are joined by Matt Manocherian, the Senior VP Football and Analytics for Sports Information Solutions. We've had Matt on the show previously. He always does a great job when he jumps in today. All right, we're going to put him right to the test right away. You can't look up analytically the issues that Jalen Carter's had off the field. That's kind of something you got to do informational work and investigations on. So this is where you have to mesh your two worlds, scouting and info, with the numbers that a player produced while they were in college. What are your sources saying about Jalen Carter? How much is it going to be held against him for his character and off-field issues? Is there a chance that perhaps the most talented player in the draft actually falls down to the Eagles at 10?
Well, is there a chance? Yeah, there's a chance, but I don't think it's likely. You're talking about a player here. He's the second best player on our board behind only Will Anderson, right up there. And really, when you talk about this, I think two things. One, Laramie Tunsil. I think teams learned their lesson that he dropped too far because of concerns that really had nothing to do with what kind of an NFL player that he was going to be. So I see a little bit of that here. The other thing I see is sort of Ndamukong Suh and other great defensive line prospects. If you've ever been around defensive linemen, you know they're not always the most normal dudes that you've been around in the world. And so I don't think you can look for your Boy Scout leaders at this position necessarily. Now, that's not to say that you discount personal character. That's obviously very important. Football character, work ethic, all that kind of stuff. But for me, I would say that this player is just too talented. He's too good. You're talking about the best player on Georgia's defense from 2 years ago when they won the national championship and last year when they won the national championship. I think that when teams dig here, he's just too good a prospect to let sort of off-field concern knock him too far down the board.
By the way, Matt, Ndamukong Suh was here. He came here in November, late in the season with the Eagles. I was all prepared. I'm going, oh, this guy stomps on people's heads. I was all prepared for the biggest heel in WWE. Nicest guy in the world. Now he's 35 now. He's into finances. He's giving people advice. It's just so different from his reputation. Now, I don't know how he was at 22. That's a lot different.
Yeah, it's almost like predicting how 22-year-olds are going to develop in their personal lives is difficult.
Yeah, he's changed so much. He's nothing like his reputation, but it was just interesting. I was prepared for it. But, when we talk about the Eagles and, it's unlikely, I'm with you, that Jalen Carter's going to fall that far. And if they don't get Jalen Carter, I think they're likely to go on the edge. And knowing the Eagles, their thought process, and this really rings with Hassan Reddick, you not only have to win as a pass rusher in the modern game, you got to win quickly. You got to win in that 2.5 second window because the quarterbacks are getting the football out so quickly. Who fits that? That should be at number 10 area. Is it Nolan Smith? Is it Tyler Van Ness? Who fits that description best?
So I'm gonna answer really specifically for you here because you talked about quick pressure rate. So I went over on the Sports Info Solutions NFL Draft website and I pulled up not just our pressure rate leaderboard, but our quick pressure rate leaderboard, which is specifically what you're talking about. Who creates pressure quickly? And the guys that you mentioned, or the guys that are sort of in contention there, Tyree Wilson is the guy that would be the highest on our list in terms of his ability to create quick pressure. He's second overall in terms of that stat of all edge players at the position. I think he's somebody that you would look at there. In terms of our scouting grades, Nolan Smith would be the guy that we would recommend there. Van Ness is interesting. He's very interesting. I don't really see him as a top 10 caliber prospect, though. I don't see him as somebody that is well-rounded enough in his game at this time to sort of warrant that high pick, although he is a bit more of the upside, like when you talk about the Richardson and the Levis type prospects.
Let me throw you one more name on the edge, and that's Myles Murphy from Clemson. And the reason why I like Murphy for the Eagles and the other two guys, Smith and Van Ness, could certainly become as good players or maybe even better players with other teams. But if for the next 2 years, Hassan Reddick's going to be here, do you want an undersized defensive end? Wouldn't you want a bigger guy? That would be the way that I would try and build the defense. You've got one NASCAR speed guy, the other side, you want a guy who can actually hold the edge and bring a little size to the table. And that's why I like Myles Murphy. How big a difference between the two guys you just mentioned and Murphy in your gradings and rankings?
They're right around the same grade. They're right at that solid starting level grade. Probably not an every year Pro Bowl type player, but somebody who could come in and get you 5 or 10 sacks each year. And I think you're absolutely right when you talk about Murphy being more. When I was with the New Orleans Saints, we used to call it a left defensive end prospect versus a right defensive end prospect.
Base left end, the old school base left end.
Yeah, a little bit more of that type of player, and I think you get that with Murphy. You get great hand use, you get great motor. He needs just a little bit more sort of refinement. He needs a pass rush plan, and in order to really be a more effective player, sort of statistically. But he's definitely in the mix right there in terms of those guys.
Hey, Matt, I've asked all the scouts we've talked to sort of in this process, how many legitimate, whatever you want to call them, tier one prospects do you have in this draft, blue chip prospects? And in that group, how many are the quarterbacks? Because that's important for the Eagles. If there's not a lot, but we know the quarterbacks get pushed up the board, that means the real blue chip players fall a little bit back and closer to 10.
Yeah. So the way that we've always constructed our draft scale at Sports Info Solutions, it's very similar to the way the team does it. And when we talk about our blue chip players, we're talking about those that rate above the 7.0 grading line. And we've got 3 players in this year's draft, none of them quarterbacks, that are true blue chippers. That's not as many as we might normally get in a typical year, but it's also not like you have 10 blue chippers coming out every year. So for us, that's Will Anderson, the defensive end from Alabama. That's Jalen Carter, and that's Bijan Robinson, the running back, who, don't be shocked if he's in contention around the time the Eagles are picking too, even though that would be sort of very un-Howie-like.
Yeah, extremely un-Howie-like. Extremely.
So we see that many. In terms of what, sort of where we get the next cutoff in our scale, we've got 31, actually the exact number of players, coincidentally enough, that are in the first round. We've got 31 players that we see as ideal starters by their second season. So that's sort of the next cutoff for us.
Now, is that just a coincidence? Because yourself and others and a true first round grade. Most guys tell you every year we don't have 31 true first round grades. Just because we know there'll be 31 first round picks doesn't mean that there are that many players. Some players are going to be second round players masquerading as a first rounder who are going to get selected in the first round. Do you just hard cut it at 31, or did you do your analytics and your scouting and combine them together and come up with that list for 31? Was it?
That's the scouting and analytics. That's totally coincidental. In fact, we don't believe in round-based grading around here. We sort of look at things, that was old school scouting. I think a lot more sort of Patriots way age scouting is what we would call role-based grading as opposed to round-based grading. That's why I said to you, these guys are blue chippers. These guys are ideal starters by their second season, because that's really how we quantify it. That's why I don't believe in saying this guy's a first rounder or this guy's a fifth rounder, because you could look at the same player and you could just have a different opinion for what a first round running back is versus what a fifth round running back is. And all of a sudden that would change the player's grade. So we do this role-based grading, and really, these starting level players, they might be first rounders some year, they might be second rounders some year. It completely depends on the depth of the class. And this is a bit of a thinner class, especially at the top.
As far as the class as a whole, Matt, what positions are the deepest and what positions are sort of the lightest in this class?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for that, there's a pretty cool tool that I would recommend to everybody over on the 3013.com. That's your guys' old friend Joe Banner, along with Mike Tannenbaum, their website. If you go over there, you can check out something. We've got a draft board there that actually shows you the board the way the teams look at it, horizontally as well as vertically. So you got all the positions lined up across, and there you can see really easily, we've got, according to their board, they see it as 5 blue chippers kind of across the board, but they see very little depth on the high end at defensive tackle. They see a ton of depth at receiver. The offensive line on the high end thins out really quickly. a ton of corners in this draft that they see that they think are really valuable, that could be in contention there in the first round. So the way that you kind of can visualize that is really nice, especially if you have in mind. I never am a proponent of need-based drafting, but if you're only interested in looking at certain positions and seeing, hey, if we go defensive tackle early, will there still be corners left for us when we pick again? That's kind of a cool tool to be able to do that.
All right, you threw out the name that is most discussed here in Philadelphia over the last week, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 since the Super Bowl ended, and that's Bijan Robinson. With the 10th pick in the draft, Eagles are just almost never in a position to draft a running back this high. They've got a bonus pick because they made the good trade with New Orleans last year. You don't go to the Super Bowl, get the 10th pick of the draft the next year. But Howie Roseman is not a guy who drafts running backs in the first round, let alone with a top 10 pick. But how worthy is this guy? He's one of your 3 blue chip players. Should he be viewed to a different light than just a running back in the first round?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you asked that because in one sense, yeah, this guy's a great player. I think he's as good a running back prospect as we've seen come out since Josh Jacobs, who was another blue chip running back prospect for us. And he's been all that and then some in the NFL. You know, anybody who's running their fantasy league, go get Bijan Robinson wherever he ends up. He's going to be productive. But, you know, in terms of reality football, as I like to call it, I really wouldn't take a running back that high.
You're from the school of Howie.
Yeah. That's a good school to be. That's a good school to be.
Howie does things a certain way where he builds up front, and it seems to be working pretty well for the Eagles. So it seems like, we're stacked on the offensive line. We're stacked on the defensive line. There's a reason. It's because he keeps investing in it over and over again, even when it seems like it's not a position of need. So my opinion on doing it, if you wanted to go Bijan at number 10, this is a really good player. So I'm not going to categorically say you're dumb if you want to pick a running back that high. This is a great player. There's a reason why his grade is what it is. At the same time, it wouldn't be for me. I would really try to be disciplined, and I would always be looking to build at harder to fill positions than I would be at a running back, at an off-ball linebacker. And I think generally that's how the roster is constructed. That's how Howie's done things. And then you look at the same time, they drafted an off-ball linebacker high last year who sat on the bench most of the year in Nakobe Dean. So it's not that you can't have any of these rules where you never, ever, ever. At the end of the day, you're drafting football players, and you got to get the best 53.
Yeah, Matt, one of the things and one of the great things that Sports Info Solutions you guys do, and fans can take a look at it, is the personnel sort of data you guys break down. You know, when the Eagles are in 11, 12, 13, you know, when they use motion, which is rare, you know, you see how many empty sets they use. So it's counterintuitive, but I've been throwing this out. I want to get your thoughts on it. You know, I think having Jalen Hurts at quarterback makes it less important to have a big-time running back because he's the one threatening the backside. He makes running backs better. And if you think about how much they use those empty sets and, you know, they're trying to spread people out. And if you have a great running back, you're almost, I don't want to say forced, but as a play caller, you say, well, I got to get the ball to Bijan Robinson. I got to turn around and hand the football off to Bijan Robinson. And that takes away some of what gives the Eagles the advantage, gives the opposing defense all the headaches. Thoughts? Am I crazy or is that?
You're not crazy at all. If you look at Baltimore Ravens, since they've had Lamar Jackson, they've been a really good running team whenever Lamar Jackson's in the game, partially because he's a good runner and partially because he makes those running backs, whoever it is back there, he makes their job so much easier. So I think you're absolutely right on that point. The part about Bijan Robinson that I think might make him a little bit of a sort of exception, sort of special here, is he is a good enough player as a receiver that you can sort of have him and you can be in a no running back personnel group by just having him line up at receiver. He's going to be a better slot than most slots out there in terms of the way he can threaten the defense. And, you know, what the Eagles do is not just what Hurts presents, but also good luck tackling A.J. Brown if you want to do some things right where you're overcommitting to Hurts in the run game. So it's by spreading you out. It's by having these difficult to tackle people all over the field. I think he would fit in really well with that. Like I said, it's a little bit of a luxury piece. It's a little bit of, buying a Maserati out here, which maybe the Eagles are in a position to do. But to your point, what really makes them good? It's the Jalen Carters of the world. It's the Skoronskis of the world. It's the meat and potatoes. And based on their history, I'd expect more of that. We did our own internal mock draft yesterday. The Eagles ended up trading up and trading back into the first round in that mock draft. Howie was on something else yesterday for us, but so nothing would surprise me at this point.
All right, since we've already acknowledged running back, not a place the Eagles put a lot of value. Linebacker, not a place the Eagles put a lot of value. I want to ask you about a linebacker anyway. To hell with it. And off-ball linebacker, I just told you I'm a Miles Murphy fan. If they're at 10 and if a couple of the other guys are off on the edge, off the board by then. Trenton Simpson, linebacker, Clemson, teammate of Miles, oftentimes played behind him. Clemson wasn't a very good team this past year, but mostly because DJ Uiagalelei didn't turn out to be the quarterback that I thought he was going to be. But they had a dynamite defense again this year, and these were two good stalwart pieces of that. One of the better defenses, probably second best behind Georgia in the country. What kind of a player is Simpson going to be on the NFL level? Where do you think he falls in the draft? Do you think he get up in the second round? Will he be there in the third round? Can he drop to day number 3? Give us your scouting report on Trenton Simpson from Clemson.
Yep, Trenton Simpson is our top-ranked off-ball linebacker, but he's just number 39 overall in terms of the big board.
So you think he's a second-round pick?
We see him as more of a second-round player than a first-round player. That said, I think you look at a major upside type player, right? You're looking at a third-year sophomore, not the most productive guy in terms of what he is, but he's just a dynamic athlete. He's got speed for days. He can cover. He can pass rush. So you look at the versatility. You look at sort of the upside there. Might take him a year to get to the point where he's really fitting in, but that would be sort of within the idea of how the Eagles do like to draft. They're usually drafting for a year ahead of now, as opposed to drafting for whatever the roster need appears to be today. So I could see him fitting in there. I wouldn't want to reach too high because I don't see him as a sort of ideal run player. And if you remember early in the last season, the Eagles started to really struggle with their run defense, and that was looking like the one thing that they had to shore up. So I don't know if this is the type of player that in that regard, but I mean, he can pass rush, he can cover, he can play on third down, and that's obviously got huge value in modern NFL.
Matt, I want to delve into your sort of wheelhouse, and that's where scouting matches with analytics. And, there's all of a sudden been this, we have all this data from the combine, and there were certain traits that sort of predicted success at edge rusher, the 6'5", 275 long guys. Now you have all these outliers in recent years. Maybe it starts at number 1 overall with Bryce Young, lack of size, Kalijah Kancey at defensive tackle, that's not supposed to be a defensive tackle at his size, but we have one of them here, Devontae Smith, he's not supposed to be able to do, but he's tremendous. How much have things changed? How much do people look outside the box and say, all right, he's not typically what you look for at this particular position, but he's so special. How do you sort of figure that out?
It's one of the harder things with scouting is being able to kind of unentangle, is this guy an exception? Is he that special because of something that he's bringing to the table to overcome? Or is this, Mickey Loomis, the GM of the Saints, used to always say to us, if we draft a bunch of exceptions, we end up with a team full of exceptions, and then we don't beat anybody. So it's something that you always really do have to be careful for. I think that Bryce Young is, as a prospect, he's got a special quality about him where, honestly, you throw on the film, the height doesn't bother me one bit because he's basically playing behind NFL offensive linemen already there in terms of the size and everything like that. What you worry about is just him staying healthy. And that's the big question mark there. You're always looking to make sure that you're not drafting exceptions. You want to have what's the height, weight, speed that we're looking for? What is the range of critical factors and positional factors. What skills do we need to see on the film as a college player to be able to project to the NFL? You always want to be staying within your evaluation system and understanding with a little bit more rigor of not going after the exceptions. However, when you do see a player that lacks the prototypical size or lacks the prototypical speed or arm length or whatever else it is for the position, you really have to go back and say, okay, I can acknowledge that that's a limitation. Does he have the other skills that overcome that really are not just special amongst college players, but it's going to be something where it's special amongst NFL players, and it can elevate him past that. So bad answer, but it's a very difficult thing to do. But you want to really understand both what's playing in the NFL and acknowledge the limitations. Look, and you also want to make sure that you're paying attention to if what plays in the NFL changes, right? If you start to get a bunch of shorter quarterbacks and they're all producing pretty well, then maybe you got to change what you're looking for to account for that properly. So there is a little bit of a feedback loop as well.
All right, Matt, very specific Eagle question. As of right now, they've got 2 first-round picks, a second, a third, nothing in the 4th, 5th, or 6th, and then 2 7th. We assume that will change by the time the draft unfolds because Howie loves to move and shake and move up and move back and everything else. So I'm talking about just a day 3 guy. Doesn't have to be all the way to round 7. So maybe the Eagles get a 4 or 5 or 6 somewhere along the line. Give me a wide receiver, because I think wide receiver 3 for the Eagles is something they need to address. Quez Watkins did not have a very good year, and I think they need an upgrade there, and I haven't been able to do it through free agency just yet, and the pickings are getting slim there, so the draft is probably going to be a place they're going to look to do that. A day 3 draft guy, certainly slot only, because they've got their 2 outside wide receivers, so a guy who is already a slot receiver. He's got to be missing something. That's why he's day 3, not day 1 or day 2, but has a strength. There's something that he's good at. There's something that he might not be good. Might be very good at catching the ball, can't really run. Might be like Quez, take the top off the defense, but catching it, which is kind of important for a wide receiver, doesn't always get the job done. Give me a day 3 wide receiver, slot wide receiver that could fill in a role for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, it's always hard for me to predict who's going to be available because, like I said before, we don't care about what other people think of these guys. We just rank them how we see them. But down the line, we actually do see a whole bunch of receivers that we look at in that 3rd wide receiver range that you could kind of pick from depending on who's available. A couple names that jump out just when I look at the draft board quick. Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. He's somebody who's really like your prototypical slot type guy. Quickness, toughness. He can sub in as a returner for you as well. Player that can get in and out, doesn't have the ideal size, not going to take the top off the defense, but kind of the quicker than fast guy that you might see in there. Tyler Scott from Cincinnati, another guy that we could look at in that sort of range. He is more of the take the top off the defense. Again, undersized, not somebody ideally who's going to be playing on the outside for you, but somebody who can be a field stretcher for you. From the slot position there. So a couple of guys there that you might look at depending on who's available.
Matt, from a scouting perspective, one thing I've noticed about the Eagles, at least with the players they've talked about, and they're one of the many teams that sort of uses the Vic Fangio sort of inspired scheme, multiple fronts, a lot of mixed zone coverage on the back end. But they've looked at these sort of interior defensive linemen, these gap and a half players. They like to call them, 4-eye, can play a little bit of that. They have Jordan Davis to play the nose. They brought in a bunch of those guys. I wouldn't say in that top 31 you were talking about, but that next tier, however deep that tier is, you got any names there? Because I'm pretty sure the Eagles are going to come out of day 2 with a defensive tackle.
One guy I could see in that range that I think is exciting is Brian Bressie out of Clemson. He's somebody, I don't necessarily see him as a first rounder just because I don't think he's developed. I don't think he's put it all together there yet, but he's a giant. He's somebody that has all the the size and all the ability, everything you need to become that sort of gap and a half player like you're talking about. He's somebody, just the exciting physical tools really get you there. So that's a name that pops out for me in terms of probably not a first round level talent, but day 2, if you can get him there, he'd be somebody that I'd look at.
All right, let me go follow up on John's question. Back to day 1, but staying at defensive tackle. J Mac has said he'd almost be tempted at number 10 to think about calling out Calais Cansey's name. That he's
I've soured on that, but I said it
you
earlier.
Moved off that, McMullen?
Yeah,
I didn't even know that.
I'm on the Nolan Smith train now, but Calais Cansey. I don't like to compare anybody to Aaron Donald, Matt. But the comparisons are obvious because they played at the same school. They're both undersized. I think it's tremendously unfair. But I do nobody can block the kid. I know, but then I say, can he be a 3-down player? Can he play on first and second down? Where are you on Calais?
Yeah, no doubt about it. He's number 17 overall on our board, and I see him like you do. I see him as an every down player. I see him as somebody who all he does is just knives through and is difficult to block on the interior there. So the Aaron Donald comps, I mean, I was scouting the Northeast when Aaron Donald came out, and like everybody else, I wasn't high enough on Aaron Donald in terms of the grade. I don't think that you could have given, in retrospect, you couldn't give him.
I'm taking credit. I said he was the best player in the draft, Matt.
There you
I
go.
got it on air too.
You had it better than me.
I also wanted Ryan Leap over Peyton Manning, so I don't get anything right.
I would have had Khalil Mack ahead of Aaron Donald that year coming out of the Northeast, but I think Aaron Donald was the right answer, but I think we both would have done okay there. Yeah. The similarities are right there. Whenever you see a player that really reminds you of another player, you have to remember that they are separate people, that just because they look very similar as prospects, that it could pan out either way. Aaron Donald, because he was a bit undersized, wasn't the first pick in the draft, wasn't even a top 10 pick, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
so
he was 13, maybe 13.
Yeah, somewhere in the mid-teens there. So I think you kind of need to make sure that we don't expect that this player becomes Aaron Donald, because that's probably unrealistic. And at the same time, I think that the comps are there for a reason. And this is an every down starting level good player in the NFL. Nothing embarrassing about taking him at number 10.
All right, I've gone down a couple of best case scenario for the Eagles in the draft. Let me go down, not a terrible one, but a little bit of a worst case scenario. Eagles do what they do at the top 10. Maybe they trade down. Maybe they get just their guy that they want at 10. They're coming up on number 30. Howie is talking about potentially trading out. Team wants that guaranteed 5th-year deal. Eagles drop back somewhere into the second. But sure enough, Brian Branch is still on the board. And we're up to pick 26 or 27. And they're thinking, we might not need to trade. Brian Branch might be sitting there for us, a guy who's absolutely value at the 30th pick, plays a position they could use an upgrade. Alabama guy, Eagles like drafting SEC players. A lot of things point to it, and sure enough, Branch comes off the board at 27 or 28. So the Eagles either do their trade down thing, but at some point, they need to address safety. If they don't get Brian Branch with their second first-round pick in this draft, what other safeties are guys who you can expect to be able to step in, maybe not start or star in year number 1, but contribute year number 1 and be a starter by year number 2?
Yeah, we actually have 4 other guys that we see that could become starters by their second season in this draft, all kind of bunched up in that range, kind of from 26 to 31 on our big board. So those names: Bijan Robinson out of Florida State, Jair Brown out of Penn State, Jordan Battle from Alabama, and Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M. Those guys are all right there. So as much as Brian Branch is exciting, he's the best safety prospect in this year's draft. And even I mentioned we did our mock draft yesterday. The Eagles traded back into the first round to get up to number 13 to draft him because they
13. Wow.
Yeah, they couldn't wait. I would tend to say try to be patient here. If you can get him later in the first round, safeties are one of these positions where teams aren't looking to spend first-round picks on safeties if they can help it. So you could see a scenario where he lasts. You try to be patient there. But if not, you've got a bunch of good players here that could become solid starters for you.
Good to hear.
At Matt Mano, follow Matt on Twitter. Does a tremendous job. The senior vice president of football and data analytics. Impressive title, by the way, Matt.
Thanks.
Sportsinfosolutions.com. Scouted for the Saints, the Browns. Does a tremendous job. I'm, the Eagles obviously aren't looking for a quarterback, but because they're at 30 and there's only 31 first round picks this year, that's always a prime spot where people maybe want to go up and get that 5th-year option on a quarterback. One prospect that's really interesting to me through this whole process has been Hendon Hooker, because a number of reasons. I think he's really good, but with this COVID stuff, we have these older prospects. He's older, so he's 25 already. He's got the ACL. Where do you have Hendon Hooker in this process?
Yeah, so we have him slotted just behind the top 4 QBs that everybody likes. He, like many people, he's the 5th quarterback on our board. I think he does end up going in the first round, just from being around different people that are pretty well connected. There are enough people that really like him that I think he ends up going in the first round there. That said, for me, I wouldn't be excited about him. The age is something that you mentioned. That's obviously there. The injury doesn't bother me too much. We've seen people recover from injuries before. But I never saw Hooker as a very accurate quarterback. I think that the offense was a lot of smoke and mirrors that made his job pretty easy in terms of what they were able to do offensively. And I'm not confident that he has the accuracy, has the ability to run an offense the way that we would need in the NFL. So I'm a little bit more buyer beware on Hendon Hooker than probably most people that you'll talk to there. You talk to Mike Tannenbaum. He absolutely loves him. He thinks he's the best quarterback in the draft. I can't fathom that after having watched the film on these guys. But that's why quarterbacks, you got to get somebody that not just is a good player, but somebody who fits what you're looking for in the position. I would have, been a big whiff on Jalen Hurts. So maybe you should take somebody else's opinion on.
I love when people admit. I've got far more mistakes than hits. Everybody makes mistakes, and a lot of people pretend they don't make mistakes. So I automatically give people more credibility when they admit their mistakes.
Yeah, you guys end up playing for the Eagles. Matty. It helps too, right? You get a good plan there.
That's true.
We try and cop to our misguided missiles, but we will take victory laps when we get things right. I got to ask about a player who I just don't understand. There's a specific reason for my question. Keion White, Georgia Tech. Where do you have him ranked positionally? And what's your overall grade / ranking of Keion White from Georgia Tech?
Yep. Keion White is our 5th edge rusher on the board. He's 29 overall. So we like him pretty good. Right now, when you look at him, again, a player that needs a little bit more of the development. He's a little bit stiff on the outside, and he doesn't bring a whole lot of repertoire to his pass rush arsenal. But you look at a guy with good size and the first step explosion. We mentioned Aaron Donald a second ago. His best skill is that first step explosion. You see that with Keion White. And, a lot of times for defensive linemen, if you start there with if you're a physical freak and you can get off the ball quickly, we can work with you. And so that's why I see Keion White as another guy that's an ideal starter as a sort of edge position there, and very realistically could be available for you.
The reason why I ask is I was kind of surprised. And I know it really means nothing, but I do factor it into my own thinking, because if someone should know what NFL teams are thinking, it should be the NFL, right? Keion White got invited to the draft. Smith didn't. My guy Murphy didn't. Van Ness didn't. He was a defensive edge guy other than the kid from Alabama, Anderson, who got invited to the draft. Only 17 players got invited, and he got invited. Are we missing the boat? You've got him in the first round. You got him in your top 30, so that's pretty damn good. But I'm seeing other places that don't even have him in the top 10 edge rushers. What does the NFL know about this young man?
I think that the NFL talks to the teams, and they're getting an idea that they think he'll go in the first round. Obviously, not everybody that they invite will go in the first round. They try to not invite too many people in recent years so that they don't have the people that are just waiting past the green
Oh,
room.
gotta love them sitting in the green room. That's what it's all about. Is see the pressure on their face, see the sweat building up, see them looking at the phone rather than paying attention because they're goddamn pissed off because they haven't been picked yet. That's what we watch for.
So maybe that's the vision here. They're just trying to make some good TV for you.
Okay, Ian's a good guy to fill that role. All right, that makes sense. Maddie, if people want your information on sports information systems, how can they best go about it as we are now within 2 weeks to the draft?
Yep. Check out SIS at sportsinfosolutions.com. We've got the NFL draft site. A lot of the stats and reports that we have on these players, they're all up there. You can catch us on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS. And follow along on the draft because it is going to be an exciting draft night, and we'll be updating all along.
And one last thing, if you're doing work for the 33rd team this year, whatever Paul Domwich says, go the other way. Dom was a good friend to the show, so we like making fun of him too. Like guys sweating, not getting picked in the first round if we can. Pick
we had. I'm trying to get Mike back on the show. We had Mike. You mentioned Mike Tannenbaum. We had him on the show. I'm going to rip him over that Hendon Hooker's the best quarterback. I like Hendon Hooker, but he's not the best. I mean, come on, Mike. What are you looking at?
Hey, he's zagged when people have zigged before, and
that's true. You got. I honestly, Jody asked me like what mock drafts I look at, and I try not to look at mock drafts because I don't want it to cloud my view. Maybe I'm crazy.
Oh, see, and I'm the exact opposite. I want to look at them all. I see anyone I can find and compare one to the other and say, oh, these guys got it right. These guys crazy. Oh, that's what I do. And yours is one of the best, and that's why we have you on. Matt, thank you very much for joining us. We'll probably try and get you on after the draft is over and done with so you can review and tell us how Howie got it right because it seems like you and Howie are cut from the same cloth. So looking forward to getting you on after the draft. Appreciate a couple of minutes of your time here today.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Check them out at Sports Information Systems. Matt Manocherian here with us.
Solutions. SportsInfoSolutions.com.
What'd I say?
Systems. Yeah.
My bad. Solutions. Sport Information Solutions. Matt Manocherian here with us on Birds 365. All right, Jody Mac, coming back. And I do want to follow up with you about the whole who gets invited to the draft and doesn't get invited to the draft. He's right. They've cut down. They used to have more guys. They've cut down on the number of guys. There probably is because, it can get a little embarrassing when a guy. I remember, now I'm losing his name. The Notre Dame quarterback, turned announcer these days. Handsome kid.
Brady Quinn?
Brady Quinn. Oh, my God, was he sweating because they invited him up.
When did Brady go? I forget. He was a first-round pick.
Late, though, and they were talking about him being a top 10 pick. I think.
Yeah, I missed on him. I thought he was going to be good. See, there's a miss.
29, somewhere thereabouts. I do remember Aaron Rodgers. I remember sweating. He was ticked off because Alex Smith went one. It was going to be either Alex Smith or Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. And Alex was number one. And here we go way down in the 20s waiting for Aaron Rodgers to come off the board. I remember him not being happy. Maybe that's why he's doing a ayahuasca. He's never recovered from his draft day status as all the way down to
Brady
20s.
won 22, by the way.
Brady 22?
Yeah, it went. I'll tell you. Obviously, you bring up Aaron Rodgers. It's good to go to a good organization. I mean, he's so talented; he would have been a great player. But in a lot of ways, look, if you're supposed to go number one, you're going to be upset if you fall down to 22, whatever he was, 21, 22, 23, I think. Obviously, you get upset, but man, that worked out well for him. I mean, that is a good organization. That is a structured organization like the Eagles. It's good to go to no matter where you go. It's good to go to a good organization.
Yeah, but when you're sitting there in the green room that day, that's not where you're thinking.
Oh,
you're not going.
I know.
Oh, but I could fall to a good organization. It's no. Why the hell haven't they taken me so far? That's all you're worried about. John McMullen Jody McDonald, you got your Mac and Mac guys, Birds 365, back in just a sec.